Okay, let me know. Okay, welcome to Architects of Change Live, conversations with change makers who are moving humanity forward. And I'm really thrilled today to be joined by this wonderful architect of change, Elizabeth Smart, who has a new book, and it's called Where There's Hope, Healing, Moving Forward, and Never Giving Up. Healing, moving forward, and never giving up. And that is perfect for us because architects of change are people who challenge what is, imagine what can be, and move humanity forward. And that starts with ourselves. So welcome. It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth spoke at the women's conference that I hosted when I was First Lady of California. At the very beginning of your public life. And then here we are now. She's a mother of two, a wife, a two-time author and lecturer, has her own foundation. So, Elizabeth, tell me, when you talk about moving forward, what does that mean to you?
Well, it's been really interesting for me, really defining that for myself, because after I was kidnapped, after I was rescued, when I came home, I thought that I could just pick up where I left off. I could just go back to being the girl that I had been before I was kidnapped. And actually, probably one of the hardest things for me to accept was that that was never going to happen. I was never going to go back to being that girl. All of a sudden, every time I went to Costco with my mom or like the gas station or anywhere, I'd have people recognizing me. And, you know, most of the time, almost all the time, it was people saying nice things, which has meant a lot to me. But at the same time, before I was kidnapped, I was a very quiet, reserved, shy kind of person. So all of a sudden, having all of this attention just sort of thrust on me, it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like it. And I just wanted to go back to the quiet life that I had lived before everything had happened. And ultimately, I had to realize that I can't go back. There's never going back. And the longer that I kind of fought with where I was at right now, I was preventing myself from moving forward. I was preventing myself from letting go of the past, letting go of the life that had been stolen from me, letting go of the kidnapping and the abuse and the rapes that I went through, and really moving forward into my life and taking control of it and making those steps and those choices that were going to help me to become someone that I wanted to be.
So many people get thrown off of their plan A, right? They get thrown into a plan B, a plan C, D, E, F, or whatever. And they're always kind of struggling, or oftentimes are struggling to accept this new life, to accept this new path forward. What advice would you give to somebody who kind of can't seem to let go and who doesn't want to embrace the new normal, even if it's something that was thrust upon them?
I would first of all want them to know that every single one of us has our own extra baggage. Every single one of us has a story, has something. I mean, maybe hopefully it's not as like big as being kidnapped.
Right.
Hopefully it's not like that, but unfortunately those things do happen.
Right.
I know I'm not the only survivor out there. So I'd want them to know that they're not alone in their struggles. I'd want them to know that it's acceptable to feel anger. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to feel frustration. All of those feelings are normal. That means like you're human. Like, good job.
Yeah.
And then I think I want them to know that although it is okay to feel these feelings and like take the time that you need to mourn whatever it is you've lost, whether it's your health or a loved one or whatever, you can take that time to feel sad. You don't just immediately have to feel like this tragedy has happened and now I just have to be better and move on. Like, it's okay to take that time, but make sure in that process of mourning, of feeling those negative feelings, that you make that choice that one day you will be happy again. One day you will move on with your life. One day that's your goal and that's what you work towards. So even though you're feeling angry or you're feeling pain, you know that that's what you want, because holding on to anger and pain and frustration, I mean, those are not positive feelings.
Right.
I mean, they're natural feelings, but there does come a time when you need to let that toxicity out of your life.
And how'd you do that?
For me, I think it was a number of things. I mean, having support, I think maybe the first and foremost important element of every person's healing is having support, having someone that they trust. And unfortunately, in the world that I seem to live in and work in all the time is a world of abuse, and most abuse comes from family members or someone that you know and trust. And so I feel like it's important for me to remind them that family does not always mean blood. Family are the people who love you, who care about you, who look out for you, who have your back, who are there for you. So sometimes it might be a friend, might be a teacher, might be a counselor, might be just someone you look up to. That's your family. So find your support. I think then also it's important to be open to different methods of therapy. I mean, there's the traditional counseling, which is great, but that might not work for everyone. Art therapy is a great alternative. Equine therapy, I mean, there's just so many different kinds, and I don't think there's a one-size-fit-all. So I think you need to find what works for you and develop those tools so that once you have graduated or moved on from that point in life, you still have those tools you can turn to when you struggle again.
I think what's really, I mean, there's so many things to talk to you about, but I was sitting reading the book last night, and what's different, Elizabeth's first book was her story and what happened to her, and the kind of unbelievable story of that. And this is really where there's hope. You went to interview people who had not your story, but who had similar stories of being thrust into different situations than they ever imagined, being raped, being attacked, somebody breaking into their home. And one of the first stories you talk, or getting a diagnosis, you talk about Ann Romney, who's a great friend, about her diagnosis, so accepting a medical diagnosis, or Fight Like a Girl, right, the organization, and you talk about her story and somebody breaking into her apartment, her learning how to fight back and wanting to help women fight back who are victims, and so on and so on. Why did you want to talk to other people? Was it that they gave you hope?
Well, it was a number of things, really. I mean, once I finished my first book, I was like, right, that's it, I'm done. I've been there, done that, like, check that off the bucket list.
Right.
I'm done. And then a few years went by, and I continued speaking, I continued advocating for survivors, for women.
And she does speak all over the country advocating for survivors, men and women.
Yeah. And I would do a lot of Q&As, and as I'd be answering these questions, I started realizing all these questions were never the nitty-gritty details. It was never like, what did you eat when you were kidnapped, or like, it wasn't like these very detailed questions. They were much bigger, broader, deeper questions, like, do you deal with anger? How have you maintained your faith? Do you struggle with PTSD, or do you believe in forgiveness? Do you feel like you can forgive what's happened to you? And I got asked these questions so many times, it made me think, well, I must not be the only person who's ever wondered these things or had these issues in their life. I think maybe if I ever wrote another book, I think maybe I'd try to address these questions. And then that sounded pretty terrifying. Just me trying to do another book. I was like, how could I fill up 300 pages with just me talking yet again? And so then I started to think of people that I admire, people who have influenced my life, people who have overcome just unbelievable odds. And I remember thinking, not every person who listens to me or reads a book that I may write is going to feel connected to me. That's just it's just how it is. And not everyone that reads what I write has been through what I've been. So if I could write a book that would speak to as many different people as possible, from as many different backgrounds as possible, I feel like that would include all of these people and their advice who have experienced all these different things. And was kind of the
So really, all of these people kind of all of them haven't given up, which is the kind of thread line, right? They all have hope. They've reclaimed their stories, right? They've taken a hold of their stories. Was there anything like you think that bound them all together when it comes to forgiveness or when it comes to hope or anger?
There were definite themes that I kept on experiencing as I'd go through these interviews. And when I then came to organize the book and who fits best in what chapter, because they all had something really to add to every chapter, it was actually a pretty big challenge, because there were things that someone would say about, forgiveness, and then they'd say something about maybe anger or moving on, and I'd be like, oh, that's so great. And then I just kept thinking, wait.
Yeah.
I can't just be like being like, back to this person and back to this person.
Right.
So it was a really big challenge actually putting it all together. But there were definite themes of forgiveness throughout the book. And actually for me, I'd even say the element of forgiveness really became redefined for myself in writing this own book.
How did you go in? What was your definition going in of forgiveness, and what was it coming out?
I'm not sure if I'd ever really articulated it going in. I'd always heard people say things like, oh, forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for yourself. But that always seemed to feel a little bit like a contradiction from what I'd been taught as a little kid, like on the school ground, when they're like, oh, if you push someone, you have to say sorry, and then they, say it's okay, and then you're friends. And that's what forgiveness is.
Right.
And so going on this journey of writing this book, I just realized that actually, no, that's not what forgiveness is. At least it's not to me. To me, I feel like forgiveness really is for yourself. It doesn't take 2 people or 3 people. It doesn't take another person, because I look at my own situation, and my captors, they will never care. They will never care if I forgive them or not. They will never say sorry to me. And if I'm waiting for them to say sorry before I, let go of my anger and frustration, I will carry that anger and frustration with me through my entire life, because they will never feel remorse for what they have done.
Wow.
And honestly, I feel like forgiveness is probably the greatest expression of self-love that you can give to yourself.
Pause. Let's just that. I love what you just said. Forgiveness is the greatest expression of self-love that you can give to yourself. Because that's a really profound thing, what you just said. Because you're loving yourself in that moment.
Because I don't think that it's necessarily saying that what's happened is okay, because I look at what happened to me and I will never be okay with rape. I will never think that's an acceptable thing to do. I will never be okay with kidnapping. I will never be okay with manipulation or abuse. Those are not acceptable to me and never will be. But I love myself enough to let go of that anger, to let go of that poison that could so easily taint the rest of my life. I love myself enough to give myself the best chance of life. And I think that's what forgiveness is.
That's beautifully said. And you also talk about your definition of hope, which I like. So explain that, because I think this is where there's hope. And none of us can move forward without hope. It's the kind of single most important thing to have every day when you wake up, is to have hope. That's what gets you out of bed. It's what propels you moving forward. People often lose hope. So I think really to begin with, like, how you haven't lost hope and how you define hope for people, because you talk about it.
For me, I didn't lose my hope because I knew that no matter what happened to me, that my family would still love me.
Right, you talk about that your mother will always love you, your siblings will always love you, no matter what.
And maybe nobody else ever will. Maybe people will look at me and judge me for, being a victim of sexual violence, for being kidnapped. Maybe they'll think it's my fault, or I don't know what they'll look at me and think. But that was a fear of mine when I was kidnapped, and I just realized that my family's love for me is great enough and important enough for me that it would be worth surviving, worth continuing to live, just to have that again, just to have that be a part of my life. And so that's really what helped me to survive and pushed me through everything that I went through while I was kidnapped. And as I've moved on with my life, certainly my family's love has remained a constant, but as I've begun my own family, now I have my own little girl and my own little boy, and I love them so much, and I want them to know that, I'll love them no matter what.
Right.
But they become my hope, and seeing change beginning to happen, that's a huge hope of mine, and it really is what helps me to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
Is that hope that even though there's a lot of terrible things going on in the world, that there is still good exists and good is still coming.
So you've been out speaking, as I said, Elizabeth has her own foundation, the Elizabeth Smart Foundation. You can go online and look at his videos where you can see the work that they're doing. And you go around the country. We were just talking about speaking at raising awareness about kidnapping, about sexual abuse. I like the point where you said, sometimes, very often, sexual abuse happens in the family with people that people trusted. So to broaden your definition of family, and do you feel that in the time you've been speaking on this subject of abuse, sexual assault, rape, that it's getting better, that people are feeling they have a voice, that we're in a moment where their stories can be heard versus maybe a year ago?
I do think these issues are coming more and more to light. I do think that survivors are beginning to feel like they can share their story easier than they could a few years ago. That being said, I still think we could be doing more. And so often I think people just automatically think that this is a women's issue, that women are the ones who get raped, they're the only ones. But the truth is, it's 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before they're 18 as well. So this is a huge issue for both male and female. This is a huge issue for everyone. And lately, I guess I've been especially feeling strongly about speaking out about it for men too, because there is this idea that if you're raped, somehow you're not as strong as other men, or you're less masculine because you weren't able to protect yourself, and maybe you should even be enjoying it because it's like getting a free lay or whatever, which I think is appalling.
So you're thinking that kind of young boys who are raped or sexually assaulted, that it's that their stories have more difficulty, less
acceptable,
spotlight, for them to talk. And do you, when you in your work, do you go out and do you hear young or men coming up to you talking about their stories?
I do have men come up to me and share their stories with me, but it's much, much less than the number of women who share their stories with me. And honestly, I don't care if you're a man or a woman. Like, rape and sexual violence is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Like, a man should feel just as comfortable saying this is not okay and this happened to me as a woman. But I don't think we're to that point yet.
Especially when actually Lewis Howe was on this program last week talking about that happening to him and the fear of coming forward about sexual abuse as a young boy, and how difficult that was. You have J.C. Dugard here giving you a blurb. What was that like for you to meet her?
I just think she's an amazing, incredible, lovely person, and I think she's, she is an example of hope. She's an example of strength. I think she's a perfect example of why we should never stop looking, of why we should never give up for missing and lost children, because they do come back. I know it's so common. You hear if a child isn't found within the first 48 hours,
that's certainly
chances are they're not going to come home, but she came home.
And you came home, 9 months.
I came home.
Right.
we both came home. You know, they're the stories of the Ohio women.
Right.
I mean, they still come home.
So you think that's a misconception that that families perhaps who have lost a child or in the process of trying to find a child, not to lose hope, even though you're often told that if they don't find the child very quickly,
I mean,
it's a hopeless situation.
I'm sure they're not saying that for no reason. I'm sure that is the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But that's no reason to give up. That's
Right.
no reason to stop looking. That's no reason to say, well, they're gone. It's been 72 hours. Like, they're not coming back.
What was the most surprising part of putting all these stories together for you? Was it how strong everybody is? Was it how hopeful all these people? What was the kind of, as you stepped back and closed the book on this and got it out, what did you think, like, wow, I'm different now than I started this? In what way? You talk about eye-opening experiences.
There were so many. It's really hard actually to pinpoint and narrow it down. But I guess what really amazed me was how at the end of every interview, I had asked the person I was interviewing, I'd ask them, do you believe in happily ever after?
Right.
And when I went into writing this, I'd be like, well, no, because life isn't perfect. Like, anyone who
Right.
answered yes is an idiot.
Uh-huh.
And then they all said yes.
All the people who had...
Every single one of them said yes. And then I was like, maybe I'm the idiot.
Wow.
And they went on to describe it as, it's not this like happily ever after fairy tale where nothing goes wrong ever again.
Right.
It's, it's not, it's not living in a palace and walking around in glass shoes for the rest of your life. It's, it's reaching a spot where you are happy. It's where, you work for that happiness and you're achieving that happiness. And, sometimes you have to take a step back to realize that you are living your happily ever after right now. Like,
Yeah.
when it kind of all clicked in my head, I remember I was working on my laptop and I was trying to figure out this last chapter, and I was thinking a lot about happily ever after and how I'd really gone on this journey from thinking, well, happily ever, like, come on, people.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of a cynical outlook, but then having listened to all these other survivors and their stories and saying, well, yeah, I do actually believe in it because I'm living it right now. And I remember sitting there thinking back on my life and the things that I used to dream of and the things that I used to want. And I remember as a little girl, I was that girl that still played house and Barbies and with dolls, even though I was like 13 and 14 years old, because that was what I dreamed of, was one day, meeting my Prince Charming and getting married and having my own family and being a mom. And those were the things that I wanted as a little girl. And so as I sat there on my laptop thinking about what I was going to write, thinking back to what I wanted as a kid and comparing it to where I am now, I realized, wait a second, I am living my happily ever after. No, it's not perfect, but like, I have a wonderful husband, I have beautiful children. Well, at that time I was very pregnant, almost due with my son.
Right, but what you're also saying is that the happily ever after isn't a linear path.
No.
That you can have really terrible, kind of earth-shattering things happen in your life. You can grieve them, and you can course correct, or life course corrects, and there is a happily ever after, and you can just find it one morning sitting at your laptop or sitting in your car and realizing, like, wow, I've had a new beginning. I'm out of the darkness. I am a survivor. I took control of my story. That's what you're saying, that
Yeah.
it's, you don't look back and go, oh, that was a perfect life, but you can claim the moment and the now.
Yeah, I don't think happily ever after is a finishing line that once you get there,
Right.
like, you've achieved it, like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is more of a process throughout life.
But it's not out of your reach, really, what you're saying. All these people had really life-altering experiences where I mean, inconceivable things happened, and yet they could then stand years or whatever later and say, I believe in this.
Yeah.
I have hope.
Exactly.
I can do this.
Yes. Happily ever after is not the destination.
Right.
It's all along the way.
It's all along, regardless.
Or it can be.
It can be, but it can be also even if things are bad, have happened that are bad, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that's, as I always try to say to my kids, not that anything happens like what happened to you, but stuff happens in all of our lives, right? Everybody. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have a happy moment in the future, that you're not going to be able to have hope, right? That you're not going to be able to move forward. The key is never giving up.
Yes.
That's and for somebody who finally is sitting out there going like, I just want to give up, what can you say?
Don't.
Yeah.
We've all been there. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who has never felt like pulling the covers back up over their head and staying in bed all day and just hibernating until they hope that their problem disappears and evaporates. But that doesn't happen, at least not in my experience, not in anyone else's experience that I know. So it doesn't happen. So you have to figure out what is most important to you. What do you care about? What is it that gives you hope? What is it that you dream of for your future? What is your happily ever after? Yeah. And then hold on to it and move forward towards it. And like I was saying earlier, it's okay to be angry.
Right.
It's okay to be frustrated or sad or feel pain. That's okay. Don't just ignore those feelings.
Because you've what I think is so remarkable about Elizabeth is that she has felt all of those feelings, right? So you give people permission to be mad as hell, to not want to forgive, to cry, to, feel shocked, shamed, embarrassed, defeated, whatever. And then you take each of these one at a time. And somehow, I don't know, I got to say, I was sitting there in my bed last night reading this, and I'm so proud of you. It's just amazing to me, because I sit there and I'm like, I don't think I could do what you did. And so it's incredible amount of reflection and hard work and inventory, and then also the courage to want to share your story in a public forum all the time.
Yeah, it definitely has been I'd say an experience, but it's been a lifetime.
Yeah. Do you feel you're making a difference out there with your voice?
Well, I hope if I'm not, someone pulls me off the stage. So I sure hope so.
Yeah. Do you feel it? Do you feel like you're making
I feel like I do, which is why I keep doing what I do. If I ever felt like I ceased to make a difference or I wasn't making an impact on anyone, then I would step away.
So don't step away. You are making a difference. The book is Where There's Hope, Healing, Moving Forward, and Never Giving Up. Elizabeth Smart. This is her second book, and she has lived a lifetime in a very short amount of time. And she is living proof that of not giving up, of how one heals, and also really how one changes, which is what I think. I think it's great that you had a different take on forgiveness going in, and then you came out. You had a different take about happily ever after going in, and then you came out, which says that these people, these individuals, their stories touched you, impacted you, moved you, and that we're all kind of, I read somewhere today, editing as we go along. I always say works in progress. So no judgment. That's always good, to not judge other people and just assume that we're all kind of working our way through. And this book is inspiring, not just because she's inspiring, but all the people in it that she talks to are super inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's always so great to see you, and thank you for joining us.